Well, welcome, Ralph.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Well, although your focus now is on guiding international tours, I understand it all started as a side hustle. So let's dive into that a little bit. Why did you start a side hustle and what were you doing then for your full time work?
Sure. Well, going back a little bit further, I've always
Okay.
been a traveler. And so I've always been interested in travel and photography. And since way back when in high school, I studied in Spain, and then I was a volunteer in Peru and
Nice.
Venezuela. So I got the travel bug early on, and I always, even graduating college, wanted to figure out a way to make money from travel
Mm.
and photography, which at the time seemed about as likely as my becoming a rock star or an astronaut. This is the 80s. And so we didn't have social media, the internet, all these ways that now we can get in front of people
Yeah.
free, if not very inexpensively. And so back to your question. So in around 2001 to 2004, I had my second restaurant, and this was in Chicago. I just moved back from Southern California to Chicago, opened up another restaurant, the other one I had sold.
Okay.
And I grew up in the restaurant business, so I had quite a bit of experience. So it wasn't just something completely out of the blue. But I should have known better. Although I opened up just about 5 months before 9/11. And so
Oh,
who
man.
no one knew, obviously no one knew that. So I was in downtown Chicago, and it was tough because 5 months after opening, the big cities were pretty much shut down for months at a time. And, no, everyone thought that Chicago was next. And so
Right.
I introduced catering to be able to help with sales because people weren't coming into the store. I said, I'll bring it to you, bring it to them, of course. So that helped a lot. But I was coming up to the end of my initial 3-year lease, and I said either I have to sign another 5 years or I got to get out of this and do something else, sell the restaurant. So
Yeah.
I always tell the story about taking a yellow pad, and on the one side I said, what are the cons of owning a restaurant? Well, I've got a huge monthly rent, got inventory, employees, et cetera, et cetera.
And not
Um,
not huge margins as I understand either.
oh yeah, exactly, and very small margins. And so as I'm making this decision to sell or stay on, this was a dawn of digital photography, if you recall, the
Mhm.
early 2000s. It had been around before that, but people were starting to get into it.
Yes.
And so I saw these digital cameras. I got my first digital camera, that 1 megapixel
Yeah.
Kodak Easy Share, I remember. And I said, boy, I'll bet people would pay someone to learn how to use these new digital devices.
Mm.
And I've always been into photography, as I mentioned. So I thought that perhaps I found my way back into photography and travel. I said, maybe people would pay me to walk around Chicago or some beautiful places and show them how to use their cameras in a beautiful place. And so I started thinking about that, looking around. There wasn't a lot of competition, if any.
That
And,
was that was quite a little creative idea too, because do remember seeing a lot of learn to do photography courses and learning about digital cameras. But you combined it with something really fun, like actually going out and doing a tour rather than sitting in the classroom.
yeah, exactly. And well, I should. So I started thinking that, okay, well, I could teach these people how to do this maybe on a one-on-one 2 hour walk around the city or something and
Yeah.
actually show them how to use a camera right there and then. And it ended up deciding that Chicago probably wasn't the best place. It's a great place, but not the best place to try to start a year-round business that's mostly outdoors for obvious reasons.
Right.
So I decided to move back to Southern California, and I became a financial advisor because a friend of mine had a brokerage, and he said, "Well, why don't you come out here, get your licenses, and you could work for me." And so I did that. And in the meantime, I was starting to teach at the local city of Newport Beach adult education program where I didn't need to have a teacher's certificate.
Yes. And just
So I saw,
as a side tip for our side hustle people, that's a great way to test any courses that you're doing because your expenses are pretty much 0. The ones that I've done through there is that the community center or college will do all the marketing, go through all the expenses, all the registration. You just show up, you do your thing, and if the registration's not there, it just doesn't happen, but you're not out of pocket.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
exactly. It's a great way to test it. Make a long story longer, I decided to start this side hustle of teaching people how to use these digital cameras. However, I noticed in those brochures that I would get quarterly from City of Newport Beach, where I was living at the time, that people were teaching how to use the camera
Mm,
already. There was a couple people that were teaching that in these brochures. So I
right.
said, I don't want to compete with that person. I don't want to have to differentiate myself. It's too much effort right now. So I said, you know what? I'm going to teach people how to see. I'm going to teach them how to look at a photo opportunity and capture it. Let that guy teach about the camera. I'll show you where to point it and why to
Mm,
point in these directions.
right.
And yeah, so that was the way to differentiate myself from them without, having to do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And that went over very well. But I've always been a lightweight type of photographer because you have to be quick and nimble and you don't I recommend that you don't look like a photographer. If you
Right.
want people to kind of act naturally around you, better you look like a tourist than a professional.
Having a course of having that eye, what to look for, makes such a difference. I don't think people take that into account. But I mean, a skilled photographer really has that eye. And when I went on quite a lengthy hiking, trekking trip in Nepal, our guide was a professional photographer. And I'd see him stop and point his camera somewhere, and I'd basically be looking over his shoulder, and it's like, oh, that's what he's seeing. And so
Yeah.
when I got back, people were complimenting me on my photos, and really, a lot of it was just that I was piggybacking where he was looking.
Yeah. And a lot of people ask, well, can a photographic eye be taught? Can you teach
Mm,
someone to
mhm, mhm.
to get a photographic eye? And
Yeah,
I say absolutely. I learned it. Perhaps I learned it earlier and maybe more naturally traveling and stuff, but you can absolutely learn how to be an intentional photographer through someone like an instructor. And
yeah.
so, yeah, so I always say there's a big difference between looking at something and seeing it.
Mm.
Oh,
Yeah,
and
so
so
true.
that's what I was teaching people is how to see
Yeah.
and recognize a photo opportunity because we're all seeing thousands of things as we look around the room or a place we're traveling. But how do you zone in on that photo opportunity or that one? And to me, that's what it's all about. It doesn't
Yes.
matter what kind of camera you have. The first tip in my book is it's not about the camera. And that was written 12 years ago when we had these big digital cameras and it was about more megapixels.
Yeah,
And now I've gone almost completely smartphone
right.
and
They're
especially
amazing.
because I'm doing a lot more video.
Okay.
So I just knew I needed to make it easy for myself. So I wanted to use my phone. I didn't want to have to bring around a separate camera.
Yeah,
And to try to do both is virtually impossible because they're very different mindsets,
right.
video and photography.
Well, how did you transition from doing your part-time photography courses to become a tour operator?
Yeah. So I'll back up a little bit if we're there for you, because what happened is as a financial advisor in September 2008, we all know what happened. We had the financial crisis.
Right.
And here I was a beginning financial advisor,
Mm,
trying to build a book and no one's got any money anymore. So this was the absolute sign that I needed, the kick in the pants to say, get out of that, which I'd been doing for 3 years and hadn't enjoyed at all. But I'd started to build a little bit of a following and it's to me, it's all about burning the bridges and saying, okay, that's behind me. Now I'm going to go full time into this. I got it to a point where I felt comfortable, but I still wasn't making a full time living. So
right.
it was a risk,
A leap of faith there.
a
Yeah,
leap of faith. So
yeah.
the next day is when I say I went full time, and that's 15 years ago, September 29th. And so I've been doing this full time now. And so I started out doing little 2 hours sitting across the kitchen table from a lady, teaching her how to use her new phone or camera, whatever,
Yeah,
little walking tours. And I did half day tours around Southern California, then full day tours and expanded it to long weekends to Joshua Tree and, Death Valley. So things in the area. That's why another reason that I wanted to move to California was because there's so many
Yes.
places to see and do and photograph there.
And tourists.
And
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
and so then it just gradually sort of slow burned into bringing groups back to Chicago so I could get a free trip home. And then, yeah, and
Yeah.
then I said, I want to do this. I want to do international trips.
Yeah.
So my first international trip, to get back to your question, it was to the Central European Christmas markets in Europe. And then it just grew from there. So now I do nothing but international tours. And like I said, I've been doing this full time for 15 years now.
Nice. I do want to tap into your experience as a tour operator on the business side of things. First off, how feasible is it for someone to be a tour operator as a side hustle?
I think it's very, very possible, but there's a little bit of a definition here. A tour operator, to me, in my definition, is a person in the destination that I work with that has all the information, the hotels, the guides, the
Okay.
restaurants. They know everything about that place. I consider myself the tour organizer. So it's
Okay.
just a little bit, and other people will use different terms.
Okay.
So just to clarify that. So when I say tour operator, that's the person in the destination. I
Okay.
consider myself the tour organizer.
Right.
And so I actually created an online course about 5, 6 years ago called Tour Organizer Training to
Nice.
teach people how to do what I do. It's called
Hmm.
Tour Organizer Training, Get Paid to Travel. And sure enough, COVID hit just like a year later,
Oh, man. Yeah.
and people couldn't even leave their houses, let alone go on an international trip or think about starting a travel business.
Yeah.
So it kind of died on the vine. It was pretty successful, but I'm actually bringing that back. So I'm working on potentially turning those. There was 27 lessons, 7 modules, 14 hours worth of content. I've thought about turning that into a podcast and or its own YouTube channel
Right. Fun.
because I think there's a lot of valuable content there,
Yeah.
and that walks people from soup to nuts how to organize and lead a tour.
Right.
Starting your business to naming it to deciding where you want to go, definitely having a special interest in mind. And what I mean by that is my special interest is photography,
Okay.
but it's now kind of morphed into more about food and culture and wine. And of course, we've always got our cameras with us.
Yes. Nice.
So, yeah, so I moved to that, and so the tour organizer training now I'm updating that, and that will be hopefully released in the next 2 months.
Right. Well, how do tour organizers make money?
Well, you have to obviously figure out a tour that you want to do, and it could be local. It doesn't have to be international.
Right.
Like I said, I started out just doing little 2-hour walking tours. Food tours are very popular today. I think it might be oversaturated now because so many people went into it. Because there's a fairly low barrier to entry to doing this. You don't need a retail space or
Right.
necessarily employees and all those things
Yeah.
that were on the con side of that list that I came up with. And so there's fairly low, dollars. It doesn't cost a whole lot to get into. So it's fairly simple, but
Hmm.
you got to be organized. And I created the course because so many people were asking me, "Oh God, you live such an incredible life. How can I do that?" So, well, there must be a market for this. And so I created the course. And but it's certainly not as all glamorous as you might think. And early on when I was more about photography, people would see these beautiful photographs on my social media and they would think, you know, oh my God, all he does is go and take photographs. That's it. Well, that's about 3% of what I do.
Yes.
The rest is all the
All the
boring
organizing.
stuff that we all hate about travel, which is, yeah, organizing flights, hotels, guides, etc.
Yeah.
So that's the hard part. That's what I do. That's what I get out of the way for people so that they can just join my trip and show up.
Hmm.
And over time, as they get to know me and my style of travel,
Yeah.
I have over 50% repeats. People are coming on literally 25 of my trips,
That's a nice
15, 17
testimonial.
trips. It sure is.
Yeah.
And so people, those people like my style and they keep coming back.
So, as far as then how a travel tour organizer makes money? Is it a combination of taking a look at your costs and then adding whatever percentage you add on it, and the commissions that you receive from the hotels and the airlines, et cetera?
Yeah, I'm sorry, that was your original
Yep.
question. So how do I make money? I work with these tour operators in the location. I tell them exactly what I want, what kind of hotels, restaurants, activities, etc., guides, the dates that we want to be there. Hey, you tell me if that's a good time of year to be there for weather. Are there conventions in town that I need to be worried about? I try to travel on the shoulder season. Anyway, they give me a price. Let's say it's $2,000 per person for that trip, and it doesn't include flights unless there's internal flights. But then I look at my costs because I got to get myself there.
Yes,
Typically, I get one free spot, land spot on the trip. So I don't have those expenses, but I've got marketing and
of
on and on and
course.
on business expenses.
And in order
And I
to
have to,
and in order to get that one free trip, how many people do you have to bring on the tour?
it depends because you could
Okay.
price it where you get one person and you go for free, but it's going to be a $20,000 trip for that person.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Okay. Alrighty.
So what I do is I say, give me pricing from starting at 6 people. So I need to get 6 people it to make it so I have a free trip.
Got it.
The more people I get, the price goes down and I make a little bit more profit per person.
Right.
But we both can make, me and the tour operator can make money at 6 people the way I priced it,
Right.
or the way
And
they've priced it to me, and then I price it to the client.
right. That's what I was gonna say because they've
Yeah,
already
yeah,
tacked on their percentage there.
that's right. And
And
I don't make any commissions from hotels or anything. Perhaps the tour organizer or operator does, but that's their thing. All I care
okay.
about is the price they're giving me and whether or not that's reasonable. And reasonable, it's got enough margin or room for me to add my costs and profit margin onto and still have a reasonable price to my clients.
So you don't have to source the individual, hotels and restaurants and all that type of thing. That legwork is actually done by the tour operator on the ground where you're going. Is that correct?
Right. And with my guidance, because I say my
Right.
groups like 3 and 4 star hotels. We like small restaurants. They should be boutique hotels, include breakfast. We like these kinds of activities where we meet the locals, learn about how they make the local wine and cheese and things like that. Maybe take cooking class, cooking demonstration. We like a half day scheduled activities, half day free time, all breakfasts included, one other meal included per day so that people can go out and do their own thing or skip a meal.
Right.
So I would say no one ever goes hungry on my trips.
Nice.
So they skip a lot of meals too. But yeah, it just depends on the kind of trip that the person wants to set up. You may
Right.
want to set up a trip that's everything included from soup to nuts, everything. However, that's going to attract a different type of traveler. And also, you might like to have activities all day long, or your clients might like, wait, afternoon free. What's that? What do I do?
Right.
And once in a while, I'll get that for people that are maybe be new on my trips or whatever. But that's a different type of traveler. And to be honest, I'm not marketing to that type of traveler. I want someone that's comfortable with an afternoon free, a morning free to go do something else. Perhaps they bring a husband, wife, spouse, whatever,
Right.
and they have other interests. Go do those things. Go sit by the pool, have a coffee, whatever.
I noticed that. I was looking at some of your itineraries and I saw exactly that. Half of it was guided and the other half was you're on your own. And
Right.
that's appealing because there's probably other different interests that the group doesn't have that you can go and
Absolutely.
do during that
Yeah. And
time.
even to be honest with you, even I don't want to be with the group 24/7 for
Right,
14
exactly.
days. I
Yes.
love my clients to death, but I've got other things to do. I've got other interests.
Yeah.
People have a spouse or a friend that they brought along the trip, or maybe they meet someone on the trip, and just the two of you want to go out. You want to go out by yourself. It gives a lot of options.
Do you do
I don't think
any
anyone's ever bored.
do you or I guess because your clients are originating from various points around the country or the continent or,
Mhm.
or wherever,
Yeah,
you don't get involved in booking flights at all then?
typically not. I tell people where to be the first
Yeah.
day and when to leave the last day. We pick you up at the airport, drop you off at the end, handle pretty much everything else in between except for some of the meals. And that's about it. But who wants to fly first class or, like you say, coming from all over the world, or get there 3 days early, stay late?
Yes.
Frequent flyer programs using miles, whatever. So it's just a nightmare. So you do that. I tell you exactly what to be, where to be when, and it works out great. But the
100%.
internal flights and other transportation is almost always provided, or
Yeah.
included in. Yeah,
So I guess your biggest challenge, and this comes with experience and just doing it year after year, is connecting with those really reputable, awesome tour operators on the ground.
absolutely. That's, yeah, number one. I'll tell you a quick story. I had something I call the pain in Spain.
Oh,
And
no.
yeah, and it was when I first started out, maybe a year or two into, doing it, stopping the financial advising. I said, I want to cut out the middleman. I want to, go direct to the hotels, direct to the restaurants. And I figured out that I think it was a 14 or 12-day trip to Spain, Madrid, Segovia, Toledo, Barcelona. I had 36 different vendors,
Wow.
from hotels, guides, restaurants, activities, transportation,
Yeah.
etc. Now imagine I have to introduce myself to those 36 people. I have to sell them on why they should work with me, and on and on and on.
Right.
Then I finally said, forget it. I'm going to work with one person in the location that knows everything there. No, obviously they don't know everything, but they have a good idea what I'm looking for.
Oh, that
So I
sounds like a
came
great setup because if something happens with one of those 36 vendors too, somebody on the ground that's organized the whole thing, they would know a backup. They would know who else to reach to,
exact.
you
That's
know?
exactly right. Yep.
And it allows you to spend more time with your clients, with the group.
For sure. And instead I deal with my tour operator who deals with the person
Right.
and has, that conversation, depending on what the issue is, of course. But yeah.
Right. Very cool.
So that was the last time. That's why I call it the pain in Spain.
Right. A good learning opportunity there. Right. Well, I was gonna ask you how I had envisioned that it was a much more complicated process, but the fact that you're dealing with one person on the ground there, I love that idea. So, how do you do your number crunching when it comes to pricing then? Like, what do you take into account? Where do you start? I guess the starting is determining where you wanna go and then connecting with that, tour operator, and like you said, getting a price from them, and then kind of where do you go from there?
Yeah. So once I get a price from them, I have a very detailed spreadsheet that is all included in that tour organizer training course. I gave all my, spreadsheets and emails and marketing and everything to people that join the course. But in there is that spreadsheet where you plug in the number that that person gave you,
Yes.
and then it has space for all these different things that you may or may not need to add in, which either are expenses to add to your client's pricing. Say the tour operator didn't include an airport pickup for some reason, but they said it's $35 a person, 35 euros, whatever.
Right.
And I said, well, I got to add that in because I've got to charge for that.
Right.
And so whatever that item is, and different trips are different things. And like my Antarctica trip, almost everything's included except for one meal. But
Oh,
that's just the way it is. You don't go to Antarctica and have places to, get that
right.
that meal during your free time.
Yeah.
So it obviously depends on the location. If it's somewhere real remote, like we stay at a private castle in the Dordogne region of France, and you don't just walk out the castle door and, find the town or the restaurants. So we always have to keep that in mind. So that's where different things are or are not included. Some countries require a visa. So there's different expenses, but there's spaces for all those things to add them or just put in a zero. It
Mhm.
gives you a total. It gives me a total, and then I typically add a dollar amount as opposed to a percentage of what I want to make,
Okay.
and then that's pretty much the price to the client.
right. And that would include what would be some, like, just given your experience at this, some unexpected expenses that have come up that you've had to cover?
Yeah. Mm. Well, that's where certainly where your conversation with the tour operator and the destination,
Mhm.
you want to be clear.
Ah,
Are you going to be providing 2 bottles of water per day to the clients, or do I have to pay for that?
yeah.
Those airport pickups I mentioned, what some type of an entry fee to a site or something. So you have to be very clear and detailed as to what is and isn't included so that you can account for that in your spreadsheet and cover those costs.
It almost feels like if it, and I'm not suggesting that I would jump out and become a tour organizer tomorrow, but thinking back onto the trips, and I'm mostly a solo traveler as opposed to not a group, but I've certainly been on organized, trips, including, like, bicycle trips, and I'm
Sure.
thinking back to all the logistics of it when you mentioned the water bottles. Like, if I was getting into this business, I think I would go on a tour with somebody that was getting, like, all five-star ratings and just make notes of everything that you just mentioned. I would not have thought of water bottles, and I remember if we had to jump on the bus to go from one place to the other, they always had snacks and, that sort of thing, and,
Yeah, maybe moist towelettes, or now it's hand sanitizer, and all that stuff to cool people down in the hot places. Absolutely. Yep.
right.
Those are all really welcome little things that, don't cost you much, but are big for the I love when I just get off of, 30 hours of getting somewhere, and my driver picks me up and they've got a bottle of water for me. I mean, that goes a long way, because it might be an
Yeah.
hour to the hotel and I'm dying. And, either I got to ask them to stop, or, I suffer.
Yeah. Yeah, so you think of all these little things and,
Yeah.
that's what contributes to those awesome ratings and that 50% return rate that you mentioned.
Yeah.
That's huge.
And I'll tell you one more thing
Mhm.
is getting testimonials from your clients,
Right.
really important. So having them tell your audience how great you are, I could tell them all day long,
Sure.
and, they'll believe me to an extent maybe, but if someone else says it, it's holds a lot more weight. That
Right.
and reviews, testimonials, feedback, good or bad. What am I doing right? What could I do better? What
Right.
would you have liked to see differently? I always ask, how did you like the ratio of scheduled activities to free time? And
Nice.
almost invariably they say loved it.
Right.
Once in a while, so I wish on this trip we would have had a little bit more scheduled activities or whatever. It
Right.
just depends. So, and I'll take that into account the next time I put the trip together.
Yeah, and if it's like one person out of 50, you're thinking, "Yeah, no, I've probably got it just
Exactly.
fine," you know? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
But if you
that's
start hearing that over and over again, then there's something there. Yeah.
yeah. Before we leave the pricing and all that, can you comment on, like, maybe general industry? Just to give people an
Yeah.
idea?
Everyone's got different costs. One guy might have, tour organizer like me might have an office space. He might have employees,
Mm,
other expenses that they need to cover
okay.
where I don't. So I do everything I can to keep my costs down so that I could charge that much less
Right.
to my clients.
Okay.
But in general, if I were to sort of give a guesstimate, I would say probably a 20% markup after you've got all, your costs from the tour operator,
Right.
your fees on your costs on top of it,
Mhm.
and perhaps 20%.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate
Yeah.
that. And,
Yeah.
people need to realize too, when you're there, yes, you are benefiting from the travel aspect of it, but you're
Yeah.
also on call kinda 24/7 with your guests, right?
No doubt. Yeah.
'Cause every second year I used to go to Japan as part of martial arts that I was involved in, and,
Well,
we would rent a house there and have about 20 people, and it was my very good friend and aikido instructor that organized all that, and therefore I did a lot of the organizing with him and number crunching. And, yeah, when you're there too, in addition to being physically in the location, you've got all these other responsibilities. Somebody loses their passport or like it's like nonstop. So you're earning that 20%.
Absolutely, and the more I do this, the less those things seem to happen, of
Yes,
course.
of course. Yeah,
As
for
I'm
sure.
learning,
Yeah.
the more information I can give my client to help themselves, the more I'm helping myself,
Right.
right? Have electronic copies of everything, have paper copies of everything. Instead of, "Oh, Ralph, I lost my passport." "Well, where's your paper copy?" Or "I don't have one." Well, that's why I ask everyone for a copy of their passport. So I've got
Mm,
it. We're
right.
going to Cambodia, we require visas. I'm asking everyone to send me their visas. Just put it in their folder online.
Yes.
And this is something that you can do, or any traveler can do, and I highly recommend it. You have an online folder or you email it to yourself. At least it's there. If you did lose your passport, you've got a copy of it. Because if you have
Yes.
to start from zero, that'll throw you back a few days.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, I've got the paper copy and it's also in my Dropbox folder.
There you go. Yep,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. Yep.
How about some marketing tips? What are some ways to build your travel business if you're just starting out?
Well, the way I built it was, again, going to those schools and, those adult education
Mm,
programs. And again, like you said, that could be for any, there's music in there, there's arts and crafts, and you name it, there's someone teaching it.
mhm,
And to just build a trip around that. Now, you may not be the expert either. Perhaps you're not artistic, or perhaps you're not a chef and your trip's about food.
right.
But now I've owned restaurants. I definitely
Yeah.
don't consider myself a chef, but I've got that food background. I can talk that talk.
Mhm.
However, what I say to do, if you have zero experience, but you like that idea, you love food,
Yes.
you could, maybe you consider yourself a foodie. Just, yeah, there you go. Just
That'd be me.
aggregate food experts in the destination, chefs, food bloggers, right, market walks, local guides, things like that. And you're just an aggregator of experts in the destination.
Right.
So you're almost like one of the tour
Yes.
participants.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's one way around that. Now you asked me about marketing. I would get in front of anyone that was interested in travel or photography. And I created these like 45-minute, 1 hour presentations. Sometimes they were 3 hour, 2, 3 hours, whatever, multiple weeks. But I felt that if I could sell one trip, that would be worth my while,
Right.
And
Yeah.
so later on, and not too much later, so for about 12 or 13 years out of the 15 that I've been doing this full time, I've been speaking at the travel and adventure shows around the US. Those are in most of the major cities. They
Right.
happen in the first quarter of the year. So I've been a speaker for them in front of their audiences, which is my exact target audience.
Perfect.
And so I provide value, mostly do photography tips and things like that. And then at the end, I just happen to drop in the fact, oh, by the way, I've got this, and this trip coming up, and I've got this special or whatever.
Yes.
I do giveaways. But one of my secrets, I'm giving you all my secrets. This is good. You're good. You're getting it out of me. No, what I do when I do a public speaking, because the main thing I want to do is collect email addresses. I
Mhm.
mean, that's kind of what we all want to do with our websites and everything. So I decided, and I watched all these speakers, and I saw that they weren't doing anything, like that. So they were just hoping that someone would go to their website and sign up.
Mm.
So I decided to pass out little slips of paper
Okay.
to the 3 people or the 300 people that were in the audience wherever I was speaking. Say, if you'd like to join my mailing list, here's a slip to do it. Give me your name and an email address. I'm going to throw you in a hat, and I'm going to give away a copy of my book, or I'm going to give away a camera bag, or I do a drawing.
Yes.
So there's incentive to get in, to give me their email address.
Yeah.
And then there's a couple winners that get pulled out of the hat for whatever items I have. But everyone gets an ebook version of my 101 photo tips book. So
Nice.
everyone's a winner.
Yeah.
You're a winner. You're a winner. You're a winner. And
I can
so
see you
everyone
from the
has,
front of the room doing that
yeah,
too.
totally. And everyone has an incentive, everyone's a winner because they all get something for giving me their because that's people aren't going to give you their email address unless you're providing them some value.
Mhm.
So that's my little way of doing it. I give away some things. I love to give away stuff. And and then I've got, I'm building my email list little by little. So
That's a great
that's
idea.
key. Yeah. So look for where the people are that might come on your trip or tour and try to get in front of them.
Mhm.
They're always looking for good speakers with good content, professional, and are providing value because
Yeah.
that's what they're doing
Yeah, and chances are that first tour is going to be a place that that person loves and wants to share with other people anyway, so they're gonna have
for sure.
that information and that background.
For sure.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask you for an insider tip for getting the best price for ourselves as travelers. Any advice there? Whether it's booking a hotel or an airline or
One of the best tips, and I'm sure everyone's heard it, but is to travel on shoulder season.
Mm,
Shoulder season, if you don't know, is before or after high season.
'kay.
So it's kind of building up to the high season or it's coming down from the high season. So most places traveling in April, May, or September, October, maybe into November, the prices are going to come down a fair amount because summer in the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere, is obviously the opposite. But
Yep,
you want to keep that in mind. That so I like to plan things in the shoulder season so that all the prices that I'm getting from my tour operator are less expensive because it's
right,
not during the high season. But there's other added benefits because if someone has a problem with a room during high season, chances are there's no other room for them to move to.
right,
So if you go in the shoulder season and someone, the air conditioning's out or water's not working, oh, let's put them into this room because there's still availability. But if everything's packed, even in the whole town, you're kind of up a creek.
yeah,
So there's a lot of benefits. So that's where the research comes in.
yeah,
But you can still go to some fantastic places, seemingly off season, and get good prices.
yes. And your comment about one of the benefits of the shoulder season being those other available hotel rooms if you need it. I mean, that is really showing your 15 years of experience coming through.
'Cause I've been there. I've
Yeah,
been there where,
been
like
there, done
someone's
that.
got a problem with their room and there's nowhere to move
Yeah.
them. That's it.
This is gonna be a difficult question, I know.
Uh,
However, do you have a favorite destination?
the next one. The next, uh,
That's perfect.
uh, no, no. Yeah, that's always a very difficult question, of course, but I'm often asked that. I would say that Cambodia is way up there, and we were just talking about Cambodia, place I really, really enjoy. But the Republic of Georgia is a new favorite for me. I've always loved Spain since I traveled there 45 years ago in high school.
Where's the Republic of Georgia?
That's over by Armenia,
Okay.
Russia, Syria, Iran.
Mhm.
So it's kind of in the Caucasus region. Yeah, sort of right on the cusp of Europe and Asia.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
That's just a wonderful place. The food, super inexpensive, and wonderful people. Incredible history.
Wow.
They have the oldest wine culture in the world. They they s- they found remnants of relics or whatever of the wine industry, whatever it was back then, 8,000 years old. So that's the
Amazing.
oldest they found anywhere in the world, at least so far.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the birthplace of the wine culture, they say.
Very cool.
Sure.
So what's the best way for our listeners to connect with you, Ralph?
Well, I just had a complete rebranding. And so my previous companies were called Photo Enrichment Adventures and
Okay.
Alla Campagna Experiences. Long words, but I also had a YouTube channel called The Continental Drifter. So I decided finally to combine these three brands under the Continental Drifter Experiences label. So make a long story longer, simply go to continentaldrifter.co and you'll get to everything because now that's become the hub of everything, my YouTube channel, all the good stuff. But also, I would like to ask people to go to youtube.com/continental drifter.
Okay.
Check out my YouTube channel, subscribe, watch some videos, like them. I hope you will like them. But there I try to provide good travel and photography tips for a 40s plus age group.
Okay.
So baby boomers and Gen X travelers. And I'm one of those. So I know those people.
Right. And we'll be sure to include those links in the show notes.
Excellent.
So, what's your best tip to inspire others to start or grow their side hustle dream?
Well, as Nike says, just do it.
So true.
And that's easy for me to say, but it's true because so many times, and we've all got 1,000 ideas that are, sitting on a computer somewhere that maybe we haven't pursued, but all you need is one.
Yeah.
And prioritize what makes the most sense, what are you most passionate about. And I'd be honest, I don't like the word passion for some reason. I think it's overused.
Yeah.
But something that you're really jacked up about, that you can be excited about, and that will come across to your clients for sure. And go to places that you're interested in, because you have to be interested in the place first. Don't just go to places that are popular because you think that, oh, it's popular, I should be able to get more people there. That's probably going to come across if you're kind of like a ho hum about it.
Yeah.
So go to places that you're interested in as well.
That's
Did
excellent
I answer your
advice.
question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Ralph, for sharing your love of travel and photography. That clearly comes through. What's involved in starting and growing in the travel business, and for being today's side hustle hero.
My pleasure. This was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Do you think being a travel organizer is a good fit for you? Keep in mind all the work that'll be required by you, not only all the trip planning and preparation you'll need to do in the time leading up to departure, but how much you'll need to be available for your clients once you're at the destination. Some people, like Ralph, absolutely love that experience. But whatever your current or side hustle happens to be, I hope you'll heed the advice of Ralph's final tip, and that is he reminded us to just do it, to take action. I've honestly lost count of the number of our side hustle heroes who have shared that same advice. Is there something that's happened in your past that's holding you back, something that you perceive as a failure or a mistake that's preventing you from taking action today? Or maybe you doubt your ability to succeed. Earlier this week, I was doing a presentation to a live audience. One of the attendees shared with me this quote attributed to Steve Jobs, which is, "Let's go invent tomorrow instead of worrying about what happened yesterday." I love that. What's happened in the past is the past. We can't go back and change it. We should view the past as a guidepost, not a hitching post. So let's celebrate our past successes and applying the wisdom gleaned from those learning experiences that we've had to our next venture. Well, that's a wrap for today. You'll find the links that Ralph mentioned and the full show notes on our website, sidehustlehero.com. If you're enjoying this podcast, I'd be so grateful if you would subscribe and take a moment to leave a comment and say hello. This will help others know that there's valuable content here to help them start or grow their side hustle. Thanks for watching, and hustle on.